Okay, so the next thing I want to talk a little bit about after is the camera and some of the things that we can do with the physical camera. So you notice that if we're in the perspective viewport and we kind of find a view that we like, we can come up to create and then go to cameras, and then we can create a camera from view. I always create the physical camera because it gives us some options, especially with regards uh, to building and architecture. So obviously, let's go to one of our cameras. So this is physical camera 02. So we go here to physical camera 02, then come over to the modify tab, and you'll see that we have lots of options here to look at. So this is in this view here. One of the things that we want to look at is that sometimes we can get kind of a skewed perspective. So if things are going up, they kind of taper towards the top a little bit, and that can make it feel like the building is a little bit falling down. So one of the things that's nice about the physical camera is we can change our field of view. So we can zoom in and zoom out. That's kind of our fisheye lens, or kind of wider angle lenses have a greater field of view, and macro lenses don't. We can change the aperture so that can tie into actually our rendering if we want to. We can set up our focus, so for using the target distance, but that will allow us to enable depth of field rendering, and that will give us blurry. It will blur out the end or blur to the begin in front of where the focus is, just like in a real camera. We can set up exposure, but I'm not really funked about that. I think what I really want to look at is down here is in this perspective control. So that'll be down in the bottom here where you have perspective control. Click that, and what this does is it gives us some lens shifting capabilities. Now this is really important. So I'm going to switch this back to 0. So you can see how that building is kind of leaning back and everything, especially along this edge, it starts to lean back. And as we get wider field of view, wider lenses, that is more pronounced. So in architecture, that makes this building look like it's falling backwards a little bit. And so what we can do is use this tilt correction to adjust for that distortion. So we can see how we can manipulate that. We can exaggerate it, but we can also start to straighten this thing out. So, and what I'm doing is I can't use the columns because all of our columns are skiwampus. All I'm doing is looking at this kind of edge, which I know is straight, and just tweaking that to fit right, right? Just dragging that a little bit. Okay. So it looks straight. That might be a little bit too much. I might tweak that back just a little bit. And there we go. It also has auto tilt correction, and but I sometimes don't like it. I like to have just a little bit of tilt there, just I don't know, so it looks a little bit more natural. We can also tilt horizontally. So if we have some weird things that we need to kind of deal with, we can tilt that way. We can also shift the lens a little bit. So we can shift the lens up. We can, just a little bit up and down. Just little tweaks here to help us. Well, in this case, it wasn't very little, but just some little tweaks there to get us where we want. So So those are some physical camera things here that are really helpful to kind of line up, especially with taller buildings and that sort of thing. I think that that makes a big, big difference to pay attention to. Some other things to kind of look at is even though we have this curve that we know kind of goes down, because of the perspective, we start to see that it actually starts to look kind of straight. So this may not be the best kind of view to show off the building here. So always pay attention to that, in terms of how the composition and how this thing relates to that. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of the physical camera. The two, I think, most important, or the few most important pieces to look at there on the physical camera.